This lecture is on the Indus Valley Civilization. A century of archaeological work in India began in 1920 that not only revealed a lost civilization, but a massive one, surpassing in size other major early river civilizations of ancient Egypt and the Mesopotamian states. In an area spanning roughly a 500,000 square miles, archaeologists excavated thousands of settlements, reflecting a hierarchy of settlements based on size and sophistication. The top tier consists of 5 major cities, each spread out over roughly 250 acres. One of these, Harappa, was the first excavated, and thus initially the entire civilization was named the Harappan civilization. A second great city discovered was Mohenjo-Daro. At the bottom of the hierarchy were 15,000 smaller agricultural and craft villages, about 2.5 acres each. Between the top and bottom lay 2 different tiers with several dozen towns ranging in size from 15 to 150 acres. Because the majority of these settlements were situated near the Indus River in the northwestern region of the subcontinent, this civilization is also called the Indus Valley Civilization. As with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, archaeologists have been able to trace how this civilization evolved out of simpler agricultural villages of the Neolithic period. On the subcontinent, farming and domestication of animals began around 7000 BC, about 2,000 years after these changes occurred in the Fertile Crescent. To the west of the Indus River, along the foothills of Baluchistan, the remains of numerous small villages have been found that date back to this time. Excavations throughout this region show a pattern of development whereby settlements start looking more like towns than villages. Ground plans become larger, include the foundations of houses and streets, and are conveniently located by the most fertile land or places for trade. Similar artifacts spread over large areas show that the local communities building these towns were becoming linked together in trade networks. Archaeologists date this transitional period, when India was on the verge of its first civilization, from 5000 to 2600 BCE. The mature phase, with its full-blown cities, begins from 2600 BCE, roughly 4 centuries after the Sumerian city-states blossomed and Egypt was unified under one kingdom. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, as you can see here, and other Indus cities dating to this mature phase, suggest a vibrant society thriving in competently planned and managed urban areas. Some of the principal purposes of these urban settlements included coordinating the distribution of local surplus resources, obtaining desired goods from more distant places, and turning raw materials into commodities for trade. Mohenjo-Daro, for instance, was located along the lower reaches of the Indus. That meant it was conveniently built amidst an abundance of resources: fertile floodplains for agriculture, pasture for grazing domesticated animals, and water for fishing and fowling. The city itself consisted of several mounds, elevated areas upon which structures and roads were built. A larger mound served as a core, fortified area where public functions likely took place. It contained a wall and large buildings, including what archaeologists call a great bath and a great hall. Other mounds were located on the residential and commercial sectors of the city. Major avenues laid out on a grid, as you can see in the picture to the right here, the top one, created city blocks. And within a city block, we had multi-story dwellings open up to interior courtyards which were constructed out of bricks baked in kilns. Regardless of population size, Indus towns and cities were built according to the same template, with streets running in a carefully planned grid pattern on a north-south axis. The size of homes in each city was standardized, and those standards varied with the class of the inhabitants. The cities were planned so that various professions lived within the same district and neighborhood and shared communal conveniences. In each town and city was a central artificially constructed hill on which brick walls enclosed a defensive citadel with standard armaments. Millennia before the Qin dynasty in China, weights and measures were standardized throughout the entire Indus Valley civilization, so that uniquely among civilizations of this age, trade could be carried on smoothly from city to city without meticulous conversion of values. Streets and roads were of standard width throughout, and nearly every major town or city that has been excavated also showed remarkable commitment to hygiene and advanced technology, with particular attention paid to public sanitation. Residences not only had private wells and baths, but also toilets drained by earthenware pipes that ushered the sewage into covered drains located under the streets. Artifacts tell of a vibrant city life. Farmers and pastoralists brought their grain and stock to the city for trade or to place it in warehouses managed by the authorities. Laborers dug the wells and collected trash from rectangular bins sitting beneath rubbish chutes. Craftsmen worked copper and tin into bronze tools, fired ceramics, and manufactured jewelry and beads out of gold, copper, and semi-precious stones and ivory. Merchants traveling near and far carried raw materials and finished goods by bullock carts or boats to dozens of towns and cities throughout the region. One of the most commonly found items in the Indus Valley excavations are children's toys. These toys tell a story about the society as well. Most of the toys are figures and dolls, models of ox carts with working wheels and oxen attached, and boats. These toys all reflect a societal emphasis on trade. No warrior figures have been found. Some goods also went to foreign lands. Harappan cities located along the coast of Arabian Sea engaged in coastal shipping that brought goods as far as the Persian Gulf and the delta of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. In Mesopotamian city-states, Harappan seals and beads have been found, and Mesopotamian sources speak with a certain place called Meluha, a land with ivory, gold, and lapis lazuli. That was the Indus Valley civilization, indicating cities like Mohenjo-Daro were linked to networks of exchange. Unlike ancient Egypt and Sumer, however, this civilization has not yet provided sources that we can read, which poses major problems for interpretation. True, over 4,000 inscribed objects with at least 400 different signs recurring in various frequencies have been found on clay, copper tablets, and small square seals excavated primarily at the major cities. But the heroic efforts of philologists to decipher the language have failed to yield results. Thus, some historians call this civilization proto-historic, distinguishing it from both prehistoric cultures that have no writing and historic ones with written sources that we can read. The proto-historical state of the evidence leaves many questions concerning Harappan people's political organization and beliefs unanswered. On the one hand, much uniformity in the archaeological record across the region suggests coordination in planning. Cities and towns were similarly designed. Fired bricks had the same dimensions, and weights were standardized. On the other hand, the ruins lack structures that can be clearly identified as palaces or temples or large tombs. In other words, there is little evidence for either a central political authority ruling over an empire or for independent city-states. Religious beliefs are also difficult to determine. Again, some of the principal evidence consists of small artifacts such as figurines and the square seals. The seals were carved out of a soft stone called steatite and then fired so they would harden. They contain images of animals and humans, typically with writing above. Mostly, they were used to imprint the identity of a merchant or authorities on goods. However, some of the images may have had religious significance. For example, hundreds of unicorn seals display images of a mythical animal that resembles a species of cattle. These cattle are usually placed over an object, variously interpreted as a trough or altar. Perhaps these were symbols of deities or animals used for sacrificial rituals. Equally as interesting are the numerous female clay figurines. These may have been used for fertility rituals or to pay homage to a goddess. We just don't know. The decline of Harappan civilization set in from 1900 BCE and was complete 200 years later. The towns and cities and their lively trade networks faded away, and the region reverted to rural conditions. Likely causes include geologic, climatic, and environmental factors. There's no archaeological evidence to suggest that warfare or invasion by other groups played a role. Excavations show few human remains within the towns, suggesting that all who died there were buried and that the towns were slowly abandoned. Those few remains found do not show the characteristic skeletal damage associated with weapons of the time, such as skull indentations from blunt objects, scratches on bones, or arrowheads or knife blades embedded in bones. So disease is also not likely to have been a major contributor to the depopulation of the cities. While the remains of what humans we have found show evidence of malnutrition sometimes, or distorted bone growth due to starvation in some cases, there's no evidence of a plague or epidemic of any kind. It seems clear that Indus Valley people gradually moved away, or their population simply declined until it disappeared. Environmental change most likely led to this outcome. Movement by tectonic plates may have led to earthquakes, flooding, and shifts in the course of the Indus. These shifts would likely be devastating to irrigation systems of the Indus Valley civilization. Recent Landsat and archaeological surveys show that at the time Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were built, most rivers in the region had little or no water flow for several months of the year and flooded during the other months due to monsoon conditions. So this precarious situation meant that changes in the course of the tributary rivers from the mountains had amplified effects. As the monsoon changed, lack of water ended the use of major transportation arteries, likely disrupting food distribution. So geological events may also have lifted the coastline of the Sindh, leaving cities that had been ports high and dry. Over-farming of the land appears to be a factor here as well. Extensive irrigation with waters from the Indus brought salts and lye from the mountains into the fields, likely increasing salinity of the soil. Extensive deforestation resulted in increased soil erosion as well as decreased rainfall, leading to desiccation of the Sindh. Less rainfall and deforestation may have degraded the environment's suitability for farming, so all of these factors would have impacted the food supply, and consequently, urban areas and the civilization they supported would have been slowly starved out of existence. And that is the end of this presentation. So thank you very much for your time.